Okay, today we'll be talking about apples and pears, and we'll make a note about quince and loquat since they're all closely related. So they're in the rose family, but they're not close related to the stone fruit, which are also in rose family, and so are strawberries and blackberries and raspberries are all in the same family of plants. Apples, they're native to, they originated in a part of Russia, well, it's now called Kazakhstan or whatever you call that, right about the center of Asia. And that's pretty far north. That's like between Kansas and Canada. So that's a fairly northern area. Now the pears, the European pears originated south of that in the Mediterranean, European area. The Asian pears originated more toward the east of that in China. Loquats south of that even, so more southern, loquats, yeah, southern, well they come from central China or southern China. So climate more like Georgia. And then the quinces, which I just have a branch of, quinces originated south of apples, kind of in the Mediterranean region or the Middle East, I guess would be. But they're all close related. And because of that, they also seem to suffer from the same problem. So the main disease problem we have with all of these is a disease called fire blight. And that's a disease that it's hard to prevent it because it's all due to bees. The bees carry that disease when they're blooming. So loquats tend to bloom in the fall into winter. Apples and pears tend to bloom late winter into spring, and sometimes even into towards summer. And if the bees have fire blight on them, then they can, as it gets into the flowers start turning black on it. Instead of just drying up, turning light brown, like white flowers. All these have pretty much white flowers. Instead of turning light brown, they go black on you. And that's, then you know there's a disease there. There is a product that we carry. Now this used to be called Agrifos, now it's called Garden Foss. Labeled more for homeowners rather than agriculture. But it's the most effective thing we have against fire blight. It's not organic, but then it's not dangerous either. This is, in many states, this is registered as a fertilizer rather than a fungicide because it's mono and dipotassium salts. Potassium is an important nutrient in plants. Phosphorus acid, and phosphorus is certainly one of the other nutrients of plants. But it turns out if you raise the phosphorus level and the plant's sap quite high, they can fight off the fire blight quite well. So this was brought to our attention actually about 20 years ago. University of California wrote letters to all the nurseries saying that this thing can cure an avocado tree dying of root rot. They're amazed at how close they'd be to death, and this would bring them right back. So the orchards often will just supply this to their orchards through the irrigation system periodically just to do that. But in pears, apples, loquats, and quinces, this can help prevent fire blight if you apply it to the trees. So what we do at the nursery, now in my own home, I've only seen fire blight once in like 25 years. One real bad case of it. So what happens is, you know, when they're blooming, well, you don't usually notice when they're blooming that much, but the areas around where the flower was attached will start turning black, like someone torched it. And then I forgot to bring a sample, and I have a pear tree in my house with some signs of fire blight on it. Nothing there has fire blight going on. So then it looks like it acts like gangrene, so it starts going down a branch, and on a small tree it can actually kill it. Big trees, it usually the branch dies back to the main stem and stops. So you lose one branch. But on a small tree, you can take it out. I remember the one year that was real bad was 1996. 1995 was an El Nino year. It's often associated with wet winters too, because the way fire blight works is if you have a diseased black branch on the tree and the rain's hitting it, then this ooze starts coming out of it. This amber colored ooze starts coming out of the diseased areas, and that's how the fire blight gets spread. The bees see this honey colored ooze and think it's honey, so they stop at it. It's actually just spores of the fungus that's in that ooze, or it's a bacteria, and then the bees carry it from there to the flowers of the next plant, and there it spreads. So it's a weird way its spores attract the bees, and it happens more when there's water hitting the dead branches, and then that ooze comes out. If it's real dry in the winter, no ooze, the bees don't carry the fire blight. So usually dry winters we don't see it. It's more of the wet winters we do. But 96 was a dry year between 3 wet years. So must have been enough moisture to get that ooze going. And real bad fire blight. I had trees that were second year trees at that time, and the entire one of my trees, the whole top was turning black. So to stop it, we just sawed it off about 2 feet above the ground. Just got rid of the top before it killed the whole thing. So no fruit that year, but it grew back to the original size within a few months. So it grew back, but that's the only way we could stop it on that particular tree. So fire blight can happen on any of these plants. The other plants in the landscape that can also get it, there's a plant called pyracantha or firethorn, also closely related, that can catch that disease too. For most homeowners, you just keep an eye on the tree. I mean, even if you don't like spraying, they say a lot of times just pruners, just get out there, you see it, fire blight starting, just prune it off, or just pinch it off of the flower, pinch that flower cluster off the plant, you've just cured it. So just watch the plants as they bloom in the spring for fire blight. So that's the one nasty thing about growing these, and you may never see it. We've only seen it once in our house. In the nursery, we've seen it several times, but primarily when we were near a beehive. So we had some trees blooming, and every single apple tree we had in the nursery that year caught it. And usually when we bring young trees in as bare roots and plant them in pots, we don't see any fire blight because those trees are clean, they've been sprayed. But the year we were we were within 1/8 a mile of a beehive, and every single apple tree we had in the nursery that bloomed that year caught fire blight. We're just pruning. So the next year we hit them with the agrifos really well and didn't see it the next year. But near a beehive, you can be in trouble.
Any applications of the agrifos that just go
Just one. Yeah, so in the wintertime when the trees are bare, now I haven't read this whole label, this is a new label because we've been using the product called agrifos, which was labeled for agriculture, and this one's, they just made a new one and quit the other one because their main customer base is homeowners, not agriculture. So I haven't read this one yet, but on the agrifos, and it is the same concentration, they're telling us to mix this 1-to-1 with water and just spray the trunk and lower branches. You don't have to spray the whole tree. The tree will absorb right through the bark. So you mix this with water and a really good wetting agent so it sticks to that trunk really well, and just spray the trunk and lower branches. If the leaves are on there, it'll just burn them right off. So do it when the tree's sleeping, no leaves on it, or else don't hit the leaves. The copper products have a little bit of effect against fire blight, but the agrifos is the one we go with. Now, occasionally we'll get rain real late. We haven't seen it for years and years, but if you get rain in May or June, which has happened in '94, I think it was '94, we had rain all the way into June, you can get what is called scab on the leaves. So normally our apples aren't in leaf when it's raining. But 94 was the first year we had some apples, early apples like Anna and Dorsey, which bloom really early and leaf out early, and the rain hit them. And then we got these big black spots, look like black spot on roses, and that's apple scab. I've not seen it ever since. So, you know, up in Oregon, Washington, it's a major disease because it rains there all spring. But in California, we don't see scab too often, but it is quite dangerous too in that it can transfer from the leaves to the developing fruit, and it makes these black areas, crusty areas on the fruit that aren't too appealing to eat. So that's apple scab, but we've only seen it once. The garden foss also takes care of apple scab. The other disease we can get mildew occasionally, and for mainly on a few varieties of apples get it real bad. We'll just hit them with neem oil, and that controls it if you want to control it. It doesn't kill the tree. And we do get aphids on apples. There's an aphid called an apple aphid, green apple aphid. Rarely control those. We get it on the apples and the pears quite often. If you don't have any ants in your garden, the ladybugs will take care of them. The ants kind of prevent the ladybugs from doing their work. But if you leave them alone, they usually go away on their own and then it's no consequence.
You're saying if you have ants, if you leave those alone?
No, the ants are the bad guys.
Right.
So if you get rid of the ants, then you won't have any aphid problems. There is one other bug that we've seen called a woolly apple aphid. So there's, if you see a white patch, a fuzzy white patch on the trunk of your apple tree, those are woolly apple aphids. Boy, those things are hard to kill. I remember back in the 90s, I had them on one apple tree. And I would hit them with all the stuff that was organic and nothing seemed to help. Hit them with all the stuff that was inorganic and nothing seemed to help. And then I hit them with stuff that was illegal to use on the apple tree. That didn't even kill them.
Wow.
Just blasting with water, knocking them off with the water seemed to be as good as anything. They eventually went away. But they did cause a rough patch on the bark on the tree. They caused the bark to deform, get kind of a benign tumor going. And you'll see that a lot on pyracantha bushes where the woolly apple aphids have come and made a area of that stem their home, and it gets all rough. But I don't know, they don't do that much damage, again, unless you have ants around. The ants will spread them all over the place. Okay, on apples and pears, the main way we train them, before we get to that, soil-wise, the nice thing about apples and pears, they can stand in water. They don't need good drainage. So that's one nice thing about them. You can have the worst soil around and they'll be very happy as long as you keep them wet. Apples especially need the soil to be quite wet. Pears can go drier, but the apples like to stay on the wet side. If the ground doesn't look moist, the apples are not happy, and then you get a lot of this browning on the leaves like that. So keep them wet.
So that browning on the leaves is not like browning on avocado leaves where it's from salt? That browning?
It can be from salt too. You know, when a plant is pulling up the last bit of water from the ground, usually all the salt's in there. So this concentration of salt in the last bit of water in the ground is higher. So apple trees don't like that water. They don't like the last bit of water in the ground because it's too salty for the leaves. So just keep them wet. I mean, we had my apple trees in 2000, I think it was 2003, they were looking really bad. I was going, well, what happened? What happened to these apple trees? And the next year we had another El Nino, 30-something inches of rain, and they looked fine. So I said, okay, just not watering enough. So I upped the water again, added a couple more drippers to them.
Gary, I have my pink lady apple trees that you sold me in containers, rather large containers, plastic. I water them regularly during the growing season. How about now? Keep them wet?
It doesn't hurt them to stay wet. This time you're about 1/3 to 1/2 as much water as you would in the middle of summer, though.
Okay.
Yeah, at the nursery now, I mean, from in containers from April through November, up until the first part of November, we're watering every day. November to April, it's like we go out there and check once in a while. You know, once the nights get down into the mid to low 50s and upper 40s, it's like the plants just don't use much water.
So once a week would be okay?
Probably okay. Just, you know, if the surface of that dirt looks wet, you're good. So. Okay, so the strategy on growing these trees, generally for a homeowner. Now, in the old days, again, we talked about this in the previous class, they want an open vase shape, a nice open tree. They don't do that anymore. So all the modern orchards work with more or less a single central trunk. Now, when we get bare root apple trees and pear trees in, a lot of times all you get is a single trunk. Now, we want to have horizontal branching at certain heights on, or certain levels on this trunk going outwards. So you want a vertical branch going up and then horizontal branches going outwards, which will fruit better. So they've done testing where, you know, branches are going straight up, they don't make any fruit. Maybe on the very tip, but that's it. Branch going at 45-degree angles, you'll make a light crop. Branch horizontal, you'll make a heavy crop there. So the key is to get the branches to form out. Now, if you get a tree with no branching on it, then you can cut it at the height you want that first level of branches to form. So that could be as low as 24 inches or as high as 36, depends what you like the looks of. Low branches at waist height or thigh height. So you just cut it. Now, if you get a bare root plant and it already has branching like this, you may not want to touch it. If you have enough branching down there, you're good. Generally, they want branches about 6 inches apart up the stem. But here, if you only have the single branch, cut it here, and then the new growth coming out in spring, you'll have one that'll pretty much go straight back up, and then the rest of them will be like this, coming out near that where you cut it. And then the main thing to do is to try to get these branches to grow horizontal. Now, on most trees, they don't want to do that. All the branches want to go straight up again. So this kind of wastes time because this branch won't produce that well except at the tip. So as the plant branch is growing during the year, it's nice to train it outwards. And they say around June, the new growth coming out, if it's going up too much, you just put a stick between that and the trunk, or you can tie it down to the next branch. But you want to tie it at an outward angle. Now, if you get it too horizontal, it stops growing. So what they want you to do is leave it slightly pointed up, and then it'll continue growing. And then as it grows, you can lay it down, but keep the tip pointed up a little bit like this, so that it continues to grow longer. And generally, you want a pyramid-shaped plant. So the bottom branches are the longest, top branches are the shortest, so that everybody gets hit by sunlight. If the top branches get too long, then the bottom branches stop producing well. So you want a fairly pyramidal tree. So ideally, now on this young tree, the first year you have branching forming here, and this goes straight up. And then the second year, if you want more branches, then you can cut it there again, and then the new growth will come up again straight, and you'll have another set of branches coming out right at that cut. And you can do that as high as you want, as high as you can reach it. Generally, I would say if your tree is 8 foot to 10 foot, that's a good height for it. Some orchards work up to about 12 foot, but no one goes much above that. No one wants to climb ladders to pick apples. So, and you know, if you have a tree about 5 foot wide and 7 foot tall, that's probably about 50 to 100 apples per year. That's not bad. That's a lot of fruit. So in the old days, when they used to grow the apples open vase, they found out, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, that was, you get a lot of apples on a tree that's like 15 foot across, but per acre, it's not as good as if you keep the trees a lot smaller, plant them closer together, because this shape here, the pyramidal shape, has more surface area than open vase. So in orchards now, they'll have trees every 5 to 8 foot lined up in rows, and they get a lot more production now than they used to out of the orchards with big 20-foot wide trees. There's more work to be done when you keep the trees small, more pruning, but certainly more production that way. Now, on young trees, especially when the branches point upwards, the only area where there's enough energy on this tree to get flower buds is the ends of each branch. So the leaves at the end of the branch have the most sunlight hitting them. So this winter, this tip of this branch will have a lot of flower buds. We'll have one flower bud up, well, one bud up there that makes about 5 flowers. Nothing else is forming on this branch. So if you want this branch to make apples next year, you have to keep the tips. Now, what I'm telling you about training the branches for orchards, for a homeowner, the main thing you need to know is that, the tips of each branch will make flower buds during the fall. So if you didn't want to do all this training, all you do if you want to keep the tree smaller, say cut it down to here in September, and then these leaves right here will have enough energy to make a flower bud right there. You'll get a flower bud right there. So if you just wanted to do it that way and not have to shape the tree. So the way the branches goes is one thing, but you can still make it fruit no matter what shape the branches are, because the leaves on the outer edge can still make flower buds. But you'll be more productive if you get this branch to go horizontal. So in this particular case, if you cut off all these tips in the winter, you've lost your fruit for next year. Now as apples get older, they start making, especially if the branch is hanging out sideways, this is a spur forming right here. So apples and pears on horizontal branches start making all these little side branches just grow an inch or so. And they have leaves on them, and they will make flower buds right there. So as this branch gets older, the tip becomes unimportant because you've got all these, here's a little branch here in fact, little fruity spur growing. So this can have a flower bud right here, another one right here, and they'll just keep making them along this branch, this horizontal branch. And then you can cut the tips off without, the apples will form on the tips when the tree is young. That's probably your only crop. However, when they form out here like this, they often sunburn. So they're not very good quality apples. The apples that form in the interior areas give you your best quality fruit. Yes.
So when's a good time to tie down the lower branches?
By summer.
By summer,
Yeah.
spring.
Yeah. But it is the fall when the flower buds form. So as long as you get this down here like this before fall, then whatever wants to make flowers will do it. So again, you can, some of the methods they use, when the branches are small, you can tie a stick between the branch and the trunk. As the branch gets older, you can just manually tie it down to the bottom of the trunk, or you can hang a weight on there. They're showing where you hang little tiny buckets and put rocks in there to weigh it down. So anything to get your horizontal branches more horizontal, not totally flat unless it's already, if this branch is already as long as you want it, then yeah, you can go totally flat and it'll stop growing this way. Now if you get too much branching growing like this, just keep clipping it back all summer long. Clip it back to within 6 inches of this branch so that it doesn't shoot up a new trunk. And as long as you keep clipping it back, it'll stop growing in the fall and start making flower buds right there. You'll have apples right there.
So we're not supposed to prune in the winter at all?
No, you still do.
Oh.
But during the summer and fall is when it's going to make your structure and your flower buds. In the wintertime, whenever you prune, now in the wintertime, what we want to do is thin it out. Now this tree is too young to do that, but on an older tree, you want to maintain some room around the branching. If it's too crowded, then and the only way for them to get sunlight to the leaves is to go get bigger. And you don't want that. You're trying to keep the tree small and productive. So what you would do, like on this particular tree, there's too many branching here. They're like 2 inches apart. So they say to cut the branches short. The ones you don't want, cut them short. So they're not going to make any fruit, but they can still regrow and fill in the next year in case you need that branch again.
So don't cut them at the trunk.
Right. Leave a little stub so that they can regrow just in case you need that branch. So some of these older branches, sometimes they break off, you'll need a replacement, or they'll get just too old and too woody, and then you can just cut them off and you got other branches coming in there. But it's nice to take off, say, 20% of all the wood on a more mature tree to keep the sunlight coming in, keep them more productive all the way to the trunk. The little spurs that form, they say, are productive for maybe a half dozen years. And then you have to make new ones. Now in the wintertime, we do sell, in January, next month, it's coming up fast, we do sell espaliered apple trees too. So those are trees that have already been shaped. With branching like this. We get them from we're getting right now this year from 2 companies. Next year we're losing one of the companies, but they do it a different way, so it's interesting. So one company takes this rare apple tree and trains all the branches to look like this. So they'll take the apple tree and they'll bend this branch down, bend this branch back over here. They'll just keep doing that. Those trees we get from them are 3 or 4 years old when we get them. You can tell their trunk's pretty thick. They've been training for a while to do that. The other company just takes an M7 apple tree rootstock and trains it straight up. And then once it gets to the height they want, they graft 6 branches at the height they want onto that trunk. So these come in real flimsy. They're real succulent branches. They're only a year old, or actually probably less than that, probably 6 months old. Branches going out right at the level you want. So this is quicker to do this than the method of actually training a single tree. Just to graft them right where you want them.
Which is the better tree in the long run?
Doesn't make much difference. These come in looking better, but this company does them short. So this is Dave Wilson. They have their first branch a foot off the ground, and then a foot between branches. So the whole thing's only 3 foot tall, or excuse me, 4 foot tall. That's pretty short for an espalier in your yard. This one comes in 5 foot. Let's see, they're starting at 2 feet off the ground, and then they're 15 inches apart. So it's pretty. It's a taller espalier. Now, one thing else about apples and pears, apples, when the biologists studied apple trees, they discovered that they repair wounds better than any plant known. So they're real immune to pruning wounds, except if in case you've got a tree with fire blight on it, you can spread the disease with your pruners. So make sure if you see any blackened stems that you clean your pruners off after you touch that blackened area. But other than that, you can prune and prune and prune an apple tree, and you just don't hurt it much. So apple orchards are the longest living orchards known. I mean, they said there's some apple orchards out there that are over 150 years old. The trees just keep going and keep going and keep going, whereas peach orchards, 12, 13 years is it. Because the pruning kills them slowly, so shortens their life. But apple trees, pruning has little to do with how long they live. So they're very good that way. And what that means too, if you can prune this thing entirely wrong, or it can be shaped totally wrong, and then you can come back 10 years later and just cut it down and start over again. And train it over the proper way. Same with the pear trees too. The other problem we have, okay, there is something called the codling moth. And generally codling moth are the worms that get into apples and pears. Generally they're doing their work sometime between August and October. So any pear or apple that ripens between August and October can get worms in it from this guy. Now, the main thing about codling moths that we know is that the moth has to hide the eggs. The eggs are high under high predation from other bugs walking around. See the egg on the outside of that fruit, they'll just eat it off. So you rarely see a wormhole on the outside of an apple. But if two apples touch, or if the apple touches a branch on the tree, that's where they hide the eggs. And the eggs hatch out, and you'll have a worm going in both apples right where they touch each other or where they touch a branch, or if a leaf touches them. So you make sure, one method of controlling the appleworm, and it works on most apples, is just to make sure the apples are, when they bloom, they actually have a cluster of about 5 to 7 flowers, and sometimes every single one makes a fruit. So you go through there when they're about the size of your thumbnail and trim off all but one of those apples. So that's an important job. Make sure you don't have two apples touching, so you eliminate the worm from that. Make sure there's no leaves or the apples aren't leaning against the branch. If they are, just get rid of the apple. But make sure that you only have one per cluster and the clusters aren't too close together. Now the other thing that's been done, because some apples still get worms even if you do that, but most apples don't. When you clean them, make sure they're hanging free, not touching anything. Most apples don't get worms, but we've had a few, Johnny Gold and Moots at our house, that nothing can be touching the apple. They still get worms in them. So Sunset Magazine, University of California, for a long time, in Japan, what they had done is every time they grow an apple pear, they cover it with a sock. And the insects don't recognize what socks are, so it leaves it alone. Now, we're not quite that good. Fruit in Japan is running a couple dollars per fruit, so they can afford to do stuff like that. Here they said take a number 2 paper bag, which is a small paper bag, slice a hole in the bottom with the X-Acto knife. When the fruit's about as big as your thumb or maybe golf ball size, just slip the bag over it and roll it the other end. And the fruit will ripen in that bag with no problems. Nothing will attack the fruit. Nothing knows what a paper bag is. Raccoons might figure it out, but nothing else seems to. Now, Sunset Magazine said easier with a Ziploc bag. So I've done that. They said the apples developing inside the Ziploc bag look better and taste better than they do in paper bags. So I've tried that, and it works. Now you wouldn't want to do that on the apple hanging at the top on the outer branches in the sunlight. It'll overheat in that plastic bag. But the ones in the interior there, you have Ziploc a plastic bag over that, and the bugs won't attack it.
Do you cut a hole also in the plastic
They
bag?
said to punch a hole in the bottom end in case there's any rain or condensation in there. But very interesting that it can develop that way. I mean, there are things that people do, like when the fruit are still developing, they're real small, they'll stick them inside a bottle so that they'll develop into the shape of the bottle. So there's kind of novel things that people have done, or you can actually have an apple or a pear inside a bottle and give it to somebody and show them something like that. But codling moth is a problem mainly with the apples and pears that ripen in the summer. Again, August and September are the 2 main months. By October, it's kind of lightening up. And if they ripen before August or after October, they don't seem to bother the fruit.
So would the bag mechanism, whether it's the paper or the Ziploc, work for other fruits and tomatoes and things like that?
I've done it on grapes to keep the birds and rats off of them.
Oh, wow.
And tomatoes should work too. Otherwise, I mean, you can spray the fruit every 2 weeks with Captain Jack's dead bug brew organic spray that kills the worms. So that's the other thing. Interestingly, you know, this stuff you can use on lettuce and eat it the next day, and you can use it on tomatoes and eat it the next day. For apples and pears, they tell you to wait a week. It's like, I'm not sure why it's worse for you if it's on a apple or a pear than when it's on a tomato. It doesn't make any sense. Any other questions on care now? Fertilizer wise, none of them are super heavy feeders. Can't think of too much else either.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you covered your grapes with the bag, did you use like a grocery paper bag? Because some grape clusters are huge.
Yeah, I used some of those, tied some on there. But I had some with smaller clusters too.
I have a pear tree that blossomed 3 weeks ago. Why is that? And is that
Well,
a good thing?
It's not a good thing to bloom this time of year. That's happening because the Santa winds blew the leaves off. So if you have a bud like this that's ready to go, and you take all the leaves away from it, it opens up.
Oh,
So just like this pear tree had some fruit on it, apparently the tip leaves blew off well, actually probably what happened here is it dried up in the heat. The tip leaves fell off or were shed, and then the flowers opened up and bloomed. So they can, a lot of these fruit trees that we have can bloom anytime when there's no leaves around the flower buds. The dormant flower buds will open when it's warm. So, but you know, this time of year I can't make any good fruit.
Well, my golden dorset seems to have more than one.
Yeah, there's some apples that don't seem to care what season it is.
Yeah,
So
it's-
Dorset Gold, Leinschmeer, and apple, you can have fruit any month of the year on those trees. You can just pick some leaves off, or the leaves will fall off and they'll start blooming again. So it's,
Well,
and
I
they
was,
can,
I was relating it to after the temperature changed quite a bit, like,
Mhm.
you know, after it had been cool and then suddenly warmed up again. Next thing you knew, there's flowers and fruit.
yeah, I mean, back when we had more usual, I made sure I had Anna and Dorset, and both of them made 2 crops a year. And the second crop was pretty good too. But
Should I just pinch off those flowers or if fruit?
yeah, if they start making fruit, you can just pinch it off. It's not too much this time of year. So it's interesting. No one really grew apples in the 1960s. We didn't think they would grow here. But by the 1980s, they started finding apple trees that would fruit here. And by the 90s, we were growing just about everything. And so Dave Wilson Nursery, which is the largest orchard supplier in the U.S., they were so confused by what was being told to them that they took their entire collection of apples that they sell in their catalog, which is probably 70 or so. I think they brought down at least 50 of them, and put them at the field station in Irvine. And they've been evaluating them over the last 5 years or so and said, yeah, 2 varieties don't do too well. Everything else in their catalog produces apples in Orange County quite well. They were amazed. So all the chill hours that are on the apple trees, you can just ignore them, except for the two that haven't done well, and we carry one of them because people keep asking. Honeycrisp is one, and Liberty is the other. Those 2 are the 2 that didn't perform well over that time. Now, we grew Honeycrisp for 8 years straight. Kept the plant for 8 years. And the biggest fruit we got, generally the fruit was about, big as a golf ball. So what happened on our Honeycrisp is they would just stay sleeping, they would stay dormant till about June. And then they would start to bloom in July, and the fruit would would mature and fall off the tree before September. So they only had a month and a half to grow. Well, yeah, you get a fruit that big. The coolest spring we had was 2008, during that period that we were trying it. And 2008, they actually bloomed a month earlier. So we got fruit about that big. And that's the biggest fruit we got on the Honeycrisp in all the years we grew it. So we said, okay, that's not gonna work. So we gave up, I mean, you can still get fruit on Honeycrisp. They're still productive. They still make just as many fruit as they would in Minnesota, where they come from. You just can't get any size on them. The difference with Minnesota too is during July and August, or July especially, you get those 18-hour days, so they can really size up quickly there. Whereas here, they say even in Oregon, a lot of the apple trees, the apples really develop fast during the summer months because they have such long days there. We don't get that length of day that they have. So that's the problem with Honeycrisp and Liberty both, is that they just need a longer period. The other thing about apples, so if you're in a lot of times, apples are partially self-fertile. So one apple tree will make fruit. You won't get as nice an apple as you would if you had a different variety that bloomed at the same time. So what happens, like I used to grow Anna and Dorset because they were pollinators to each other. Didn't like the Dorset, so I just kept the Anna. Without the Dorset, there might be 20% fewer fruit, and the fruit is not as round, because when you open the fruit up, they don't have all the seeds in them anymore. So there's only seeds on one side, the fruit comes out lopsided. Doesn't bother me. I still get more Anna apples than I can eat, so it's not a big deal. But if you want maximum crop, you want at least 2 varieties of apples in your orchard, and they have to be pretty close. So they used to put the different apples in different rows in the orchard, and they said, the farmers are watching the bees go down the row. They said they don't cross to the next row. They're just going down that row, branch. So now they're putting the apples in the same row, 2 different varieties in the same row, to make sure that they get that pollination, cross-pollination going, so for a bigger crop. So it's nice to have more than one. Now, what they also know about Southern California is all the apples, except for the real early ones, tend to bloom at the same time. Whereas if you look in an apple book, they'll tell you which apples pollinate better, because up in Oregon and Washington, each apple variety tends to bloom only for 2 weeks. In Southern California, that same apple variety bloomed for 2 months. Because we have such an unusual, our spring, we don't have a winter and spring, definite winter and spring. It's cool, warm, and then it's cool all spring sometimes. Whereas up in the apple orchard area, as they said, it's cold and then it's warm. It doesn't go back and forth enough for the apples. They just know it's warm now, so they all wake up and all the flowers on the same tree, same variety, bloom at the same time for about 2 weeks, and then they're done. Here, not an issue. It takes months and months for the tree to entirely wake up. So any 2 varieties that, of the later apples that bloom, you're fine, and any varieties of the early apples. There's 3 early apples that we grow, and everything else blooms later, unless you get a Honeycrisp that blooms really, really late. But
And so what are those varieties?
Old Michelin.
Oh.
So
The Macintosh still looks good here?
apparently so. So one of the stories I read back in the 80s was about Rome Beauty apples, which were developed in New England. The book says they need 1,000 hours, yet they're a major crop in the Philippines. So the Philippines, they said, never drops below 57. They have 0 chill in the Philippines, but they get Rome Beauty apples. So what they do with them is that they said 2 weeks after the crop is ripe, and they grow them in the mountains, so it's not extremely hot there. It's in the 70s to 80s for the most part. But what they do is they strip all the leaves off the branches 2 weeks after the crop is off. And 2 weeks later, all the flowers open up again and they have another crop going.
Before.
And every 6 months they get another crop. So they just strip the apples, or they can strip the apples any time of year they want, and then they'll bloom 2 weeks after that. So if you were to strip your apple tree in the middle of summer, yeah, it'll bloom again. But you know, the problem is if some of the apples take longer to perform, like something like Granny Smith, won't have time to make that second crop because it gets too cool after October for them to develop further. Whereas if you're in the tropics, they can develop any time of the year, really. The other thing about apples to know, this is important. The best quality fruit occurs when you don't have really stinking hot weather for the 2 weeks before they ripen. So the apples that ripen in August and September, if we're getting an unusually hot heat wave, they don't turn out too good. Unless you're on the coastline. So some of the apple, like Johnny Gold, ripens August, September. People in Huntington Beach told me this is the best apple we've ever grown. A friend of mine who lives in Huntington Beach says he has 2 of them in his yard, and I says, this is a wonderful apple. Where I grew in Mission Viejo, they didn't turn out that well. They got a bitter pit. I didn't mention that. Bitter pit is another, it's not a disease. Bitter pit in an apple is when you have an apple and you have these hardened brown areas inside the flesh. You'll see that in some apples you buy at the store too. That's bitter pit. It happens for the same reason that tomatoes get that blossom end rot. It's a lack of calcium in the fruit. And some apples, especially the big ones like Johnny Gold, Mutsu, some of the real big apples, they get bitter pit when the trees are young, no matter what you do. As the trees mature and the root systems get better at getting calcium out of the ground and distributing it to the tree, this goes away. You can spray the apples with and then bring it up. We have calcium sulfate on the shelf. It's a product also known as rot stop. So blossom end rot on tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, squash, apples, and pears. If you spritz the fruit with this calcium product every week, once a week while the fruit's developing, you won't see the bitter pit develop or the blossom end rot on tomatoes develop. You actually have to spray the fruit because sometimes the plant just doesn't have thick enough stems to hold enough calcium to service that fruit. So yeah, it's a bitter pit. Occurs during inland heat also. So people on the coast can get really good apples anytime the apple ripens because they just don't get that hot, that extreme heat, especially at night. Whereas here, if we have a heat wave and the apples ripen during a heat wave, they don't turn out quite as well if we have an extended heat wave. Now we're nothing like Riverside or Fresno where it's just hot, just stinking hot all the time. So most years, even if they ripen at the wrong time, you'll still get pretty good apples. But if we have an unusually hot summer, you can get messed up crop on one of these summer apples. So here, if you want really good apples, the best apples to plant are the ones that ripen in July, just before the heat wave comes, or November, December, after all the heat waves are over. Those apples you'll never mess up on. The apples that are August, September, October, some years you can get messed up, although most years you'll probably be fine. So we do carry the first apple ripen here. Now, a lot of the ripening charts for the Central Valley don't resemble the ripening charts for Orange County because things happen different here. So Dorset Golden is usually June here. And that's the yellow, delicious type apple. So these are the early apples. You have Dorset Golden, Einschmier. I don't have that on the list, so I might not be getting that one. Einschmier. This is an Einschmier apple. And Anna are the 3 early apples that we carry. I believe this is June. This is June, July.
What about demi-gold? I bought demi-gold
I don't know that
earlier.
one.
It's a July.
I don't know that apple. But these are the real early apples. These two are both daughters of Golden Delicious. Doris Golden was someone spit out some Golden Delicious seeds in the Bahamas, and that thing came up. Einschmer and Ann are from Israel. I like the Ann apple a lot. Personally, I like that one a lot. It's a real tall, cylindrical apple, a big apple that is kind of yellowish. Well, it's main color and it's red with some green. The problem with all the early apples is they have poor hang time and poor shelf life. So what I mean by that, like if you have say a Fuji apple, you can leave it on a tree for 2 months, nothing happens. It stays firm and nice. An Ann apple, you leave it on the tree a couple weeks too long and it's mushy already. Any of these apples, they're mushy already. Beverly Hills, which is a July apple, is mushy already. I grew Beverly Hills. That was one of the first apples promoted back in the 60s. My dad grew it. Whenever we picked it, it was already mushy. We never caught it in time. It always looked green, and then when it turned a little red, it was already mushy. So we don't push that one that much, even though it does well here. It's just too hard to tell when it's ripe. But we like to pick it right before it turns totally red. And it's got a lot of the same qualities that Honeycrisps have that make it so good. You know, it's crispy but tender, and it's got a little bit of a sharp taste to it. It's not totally just sweet. So we do like the Anna. If you want Anna to last at all, you pick it off the tree, put it in a Ziploc bag, squeeze the air out, throw it in the fridge. It'll last 2 months that way. But on the shelf in your house, 2 days it gets mushy. So it has very short shelf life. And same with all the early apples, short shelf life. But these all
What did you say
bloom.
about the refrigerator? Put it in what kind of a bag?
Ziploc.
Okay.
One of my employees' moms figured this one out. She said, just take a straw, put it in a Ziploc bag, suck all the air out of there, and zip it closed, because it's the oxygen that makes them continue ripening. So, you know, apples, when they store them in the warehouse, and they'll store Fujis in the warehouse for over a year, they just, instead of doing that, they just use a lot of carbon dioxide, which is the other side of oxygen, so that the carbon dioxide will let them continue to ripen. So I guess you can breathe breathe into the bag, get your carbon dioxide in there, and that'll stop them from ripening too. And these 3 apple trees, you can make 2 crops here. It's so early, by the time the crop's off, you just strip the leaves off of certain branches and they'll bloom again, and they'll make that second crop by late October, November. So they actually have time to form 2 crops. And then of the ones we're carrying, the next one to ripen is going to be Gala. And Gala is August. Now Gala is the one apple that, well, there's more than one, but Gala is one that can handle the heat. So if it's real hot in August, it don't matter, Gala's going to turn out fine. I would just say the one thing about Gala is the apples are small. It takes a while for the tree to make decent sized fruit. So, but Gala is from New Zealand originally. Then John and Gold comes in. Again, if you're by the coast, this is a wonderful apple. So it's August, late August through September. John and Gold won taste test in the 80s. So it is one of the best apples out there. Most people concede Honeycrisp is the best apple. And that's one we can't do. Now we got a new one called Ghost, but I forgot, I think we wrote down in the newsletter last week when it ripened. I think it was July. I can't remember for sure though. The Ghost is a white apple that's brand new. Let me see if it's in this latest catalog. The Ghost is supposed to be unusual in that the skin is almost it's pure white. No, it's not in the catalog. So I had some information on that last week's email, and if you look it on the internet, you'll find it. So we do expect Ghost to perform well here. Hopefully Dave Wilson had it in their test patch. And then Fuji comes in next. Fuji is September, October.
Ghost is July.
Thank you. The people who have it, who've grown it, says it looks really weird to have those white apples up there. So Fuji, there's Fuji and there's red Fuji. The critics will say that the original Fuji, which has greener skin, tastes better than the red ones. But all the taste tests, the red Fuji wins because visual is part of the game. So people see the red skin on the red Fuji like it better than the regular Fuji. And Fuji is one where they'll tell you if you're, because there's not much acidity to the fruit, that makes Fuji taste good is the amount of sugar it has. But if you're too greedy a grower and you leave too much fruit on the tree, then they come out real flat tasting. And if the fruit's small, that means that the size on fruit trees has to do with two things: number of fruit on the tree and amount of water you give it. So the more fruit you have on the tree, the smaller the fruit are. And they say if you buy the smaller Fuji apples at the store, they got no taste. If you buy the big ones at the store, they taste a lot better. That means the farmer was more strict about how much fruit he left on the tree. So they actually did a taste test. I mean, they did a test for the farmers to make sure they knew how much fruit the tree can hold. And they said you get maximum quality fruit if you've got one apple for every 27 leaves on the Fuji apple tree. So someone actually did that and counted the leaves to see how many leaves they would need to get maximum quality. So Fuji has been abused by the farmers. Brayburn. This was one of the first apples that I ate that was grown in Laguna Niguel. Someone gave me some of these in the 1980s, says, why aren't we growing these? So Brayburn does well also. Well, again, all the apples do well here. Brayburn is more or less, I believe it's October 2. Check that out. Yeah. So that's a later apple also. So it's this group of apples right here that the worms can get into, especially John and Gold down in Brayburn. It's where the codling moths are active. The ones before that, not much. The ones after this, not much. So the last group of apples would be Granny Smith, Pink Lady, and Sundowner. And they all kind of ripen at the same time. November, December, into January. They'll hold on a long. In fact, Granny Smith seems to hold on forever. Granny Smith can take you all the way out to February. Now, Brayburn and Gala were from New Zealand. Fuji's Japan. John and Gold is New York. There is a new apple that's coming out that's a daughter of Honeycrisp. I think it was called Sweet Tart. That's meant for New York, because they said even in New York they don't have enough cold for Honeycrisp. So I'm gonna look out for that one in the next few years, see if we can find it, because all the stuff from New York works here. So if we can get the Sweet Tart from New York to work here, that'd be nice, because then you'd have a Honeycrisp type that does well better here. In fact, we grew an apple called Zestar, which was also from Minnesota. Occasionally, Dave Wilson has an overcrop where there's certain apples they grow for orchards that we're not supposed to be able to get. But around February, if the orchards don't take them, they put them on the open market and they'll find these things. And Zestar was one of the ones that came out of the same breeder that Honeycrisp came out of. And we got some little trees this big, and they made fruit that year, and they were good, kind of brown sugary tasting. And one of my employees took one home, and he says his apple produced the next year too, with the Southern California winter. So there's an apple called Zestar out there with a Z that's pretty darn good. I haven't seen it on their catalog since, but if it pops up, I'll certainly grab some of those. So there's some different apples out there. Like I keep looking for Opal, that bright yellow apple in the surface. I like that one, but haven't seen it in any catalog. A lot of the orchard trees, they will not sell them to homeowners for like 10 years. They want the orchards to have first dibs at them, which is kind of silly because I would think you can get the apple more popular by getting the public sooner, but the orchard guys want exclusive rights to things. So Opal, and there's a few other apples I just don't see in any catalog. But
What about, Koru, K-O-R-U, it comes from New Zealand? It's very tasty, I've tasted it.
well, there's something out there that's a Fuji derivative that starts with a K. It's like the better Fuji.
No, it's red on the outside, it's quite yellow inside.
Oh, I don't know that one. But yeah, there's a lot of neat stuff out there that we normally can't get a hold of.
They had it at, Sprouts and, Whole Foods.
Gary, I brought down an Arkansas Black from the Gold Country and planted it, and the deer ate the whole tree. But you know, I haven't been able to get another one like that. I don't know if you ever look for that. It's a delicious apple. You can't find it in the grocery store, but it's really good.
We've carried that in the past,
Have you?
and it's done well. I know we have one tree in the nursery. My daughter has one somewhere in the nursery, but I don't think she's selling that one. We might be able to take some grafts off it, but they are available. We can probably order them. If you wanted, say, 3 of them, I'd buy them for you.
Okay.
Because we have to buy them in groups of 5. I haven't eaten enough to tell you. What would you say it tastes like different compared to these?
I've never seen it in a grocery store, but you know, one time, and that was at one of those Sprouts kind of places. But we love that apple.
That's a dark red apple,
Does it have an
isn't
acid
it?
or a tang to it?
Compared to.
It's a crisp, sweet apple. Real crisp, not very big, not like a Washington apple where you have to hold it in your hand. It's not mushy. You don't use it for cooking, you use it for eating. I'm not an expert. Gary, you have to talk to Gary, you know. he
Yeah, in the
knows more
catalog
about
it says large late season apple, dark red skin, high quality even when summer nights are warm. For dessert and cooking, it says keeps many months. General requirement 500 to 600 hours. Again, you can don't worry about that part because we've grown those in the past, carried them in the past. So Arkansas Black, yes.
What did you say about those middle varieties right there?
Well, the ones that can get the codling moths are generally these right in here.
And do you spray those to make sure, or what do you do to?
Make sure they don't touch. Well, the first thing is make sure you don't have 2 apples touching because they have to hide the eggs, and make sure they're hanging free. If you still get worms, you can either spray them every 2 weeks, or you can put a Ziploc bag around them or a paper bag around the fruit. Aluminum foil might work too. So, now, the last 3 are the Australian apples. And the most interesting one is Granny Smith, because they grow Granny Smith in Oregon. But Granny Smith is actually from Sydney, Australia. If you know anything about Australia, Sydney is about the same latitude as Mazatlan, Mexico. It is really tropical. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna look up exactly, see where Granny Smith, where the person who found it, Mrs. Smith, lived. Maybe she lived in the mountains near there, like the mountains near Mazatlan, but she lived right near the ocean on the delta. So, you know, they said they grow pineapples there. So in Australia, Granny Smith apples grow right next to pineapples. And in the books, of course, they say Granny Smith needs how many hours to chill? Actually, this one, 400 hours to chill. So we know they need 0 if they're from that, from Sydney. So Granny Smith has done really well in Southern California. I mean, incredibly well. And if you don't like them tart, like my neighbor's got a tree that hangs over my side of the fence, so he already picked his in October. He likes them nice and tart. Well, if you leave them on the tree until Christmas, they're yellow and they're sweet, they're still crispy, and they're really fragrant. And we've left them on the tree till February on our side of the fence. And in February, you can smell them from about 100 feet away. It's just an apple odor coming off these apples. Yeah, they think Granny Smith originated because they weren't growing apples in Australia when Granny Smith was there. She was always bringing crates of apples from France. And she'd throw the seeds into her compost pile, and this Granny Smith apple tree came up. They think it's a rare apple cross with the French crab. That's what originated, because they said the apples are kind of slimy, like the French crabs are. So that's where Granny Smith came from. Pink Lady and Sundowner from Perth, Australia, which is the southern tip. And the latitude there is the same as Orange County. So Pink Lady and Sundowner seem to like our climate really well. And I would tell you the best apple I've grown ever, Sundowner. Now, in Australia, Pink Lady is known as Cripps Pink. Mr. Cripps developed them, and Sundowner's Cripps Red. And Cripps Red is the #1 selling apple in Australia. The reason why it's not popular here yet is because it looks just like a Fuji. So they brought Pink Lady over because it looks totally unique. But Pink Lady's, what the difference between Pink Lady and Sundowner? Sundowner is like a Pink Lady, except it's sweeter, not quite as tart, because I consider Pink Lady a little bit on the tart side. And it's not quite as hard, because Pink Lady is almost Granny Smith hard, where you take a big bite and you can bite your tongue or your cheek because it suddenly gives. Whereas Sundowner is a little more tender than Pink Lady. So the Sundowner seems to be like the perfect apple for me. It's, not quite as tender as Honeycrisp, not quite as sweet as Honeycrisp, but it's in that zone. It's a really good apple, because our first crop now, every year now we're selling out of stuff. But 2 years ago, we had our first crop of the Sundowners in the nursery. We had currant trees making fruit and trees from the year before making fruit for the first time. And we harvested some Sundowners and sold out the trees in 2 weeks, because once people knew how good they tasted, they just bought them. So Sundowner is an excellent apple.
Can you use that for cooking too? Is it eating or
It's firm enough, just like Pink Lady's firm enough.
As far as something to do with your apples, the brown bag apple pie, go to King Arthur Flour and look for their brown bag apple pie. It's a great recipe. You put a crumble on top for the top of it instead of a pastry over the top. You put the whole thing inside of a paper bag and put it in the oven. And turns out, and you cook it at 450 degrees. Turns out great.
Okay, any questions on apples? Again, there's,
You need a pollinator for that Sundowner?
well, it's nice to have one. All apples are partially self-fertile, so you'll make, say, 2/3 of your normal crop to 3/4 without having a pollinator there. But you'll get better shaped apples, slightly bigger apples, and more of them if you have a pollinator around.
Okay.
So Pink Lady and Sundowner would pollinate each other. But you can get, so you can take your apples, and you can have apples from June through February if you get all the different varieties out there. so they can all overlap, and you can group them. So in my yard, I've got 3 apple groups. Each group of apples, there's 4 apple trees, and we grow each group as 1 apple tree, 8 foot across and 8 foot tall, but it's got 4 different apples, and I got 3 of those in my yard. One with kind of 2 of them with these apples, and I have 1 with some really weird apples: Hudson's Golden Gem, Spitzenberg, Newton Pippin. I mean, Pippin's considered the best tasting apple ever by the people in Oregon, and I've got a Newton at my house. I got 2 of them actually. The only thing wrong is, even though they're good, they're real small, like this big. So, and most of the, now it's interesting, most of the apples before 1900 were all storage apples. So one of the reasons, you know, apples used to be incredibly popular. I mean, they're used to be the #1 produce in the United States, and for a good reason. It was the only fruit that people could store all winter in their cellars and eat them. So it was the only source of fresh food they had. So everybody had to grow apples. In fact, they said in the 1700s and 1800s, it was apple cider was the only beverage you can drink that might not poison you. You know, besides liquor, cider was extremely important. Everybody had to have cider in order to drink something, because they didn't know anything about how to sterilize water in those days. So you had, in the cities, the water was horrible. You couldn't drink the water, so they drank cider. So the apple, there's apple trees all over the place, because that was the safest drink for the kids. Apple cider.
When you plant your 4 apple trees together, so if like here's the 4 trunks, the branches that are growing this way, do you chop them or do you let them go like this?
When you plant 4 trees close together, they tend not to do that. Now, the only apple tree that's ever gone haywire on me is the Mutsu, because it was on standard rootstock and not on semi-dwarf. But if they're all in the same rootstock, they all have the same vigor, and they just, the branches on this tree don't know it's the same tree. They just automatically head away from each other because they're reaching for the light. When you have 4 trees there, they don't know that they're not the same tree either. They just head away from each other.
Did you do them 18 inches like Dave Wilson says?
The first time I did it, I did them 6 inches because I didn't know any better. I didn't read the literature yet. And what happened at 6 inches apart is that when they were loading up with the apples, they started to lean out. So I just tied them together with rope, and they've been there ever since. But, so Dave Wilson says 24 inches originally, and then they said, 18 inches is working. So the 18 inches between trunks, and you go up to 5 trees in the group. So you can, you get 5 different apple trees each. So my Anna is 1/4 of my group, and it still will do 50 apples. That's still a lot of apples. So.
Yeah.
Here's the apple pie.
Looks good.
Looks good.
Bring it next time.
And you can mix, apples, you can have more than one.
Oh, we do have wine sap coming too. Someone special ordered that, so I brought in. Let's see what that's about. Long time favorite red apple, ripened real late. Let's see what it ripens. I'm not seeing on their ripening chart. There it is. It's just early fall for the wine sap.
So is your son down there bare root, Harry? And that's coming in when?
All this stuff, well, they haven't set a date. Normally we get our bare root trees in January, but with Christmas being on a Monday, they might do it a few days before the 1st. So you might have it there the weekend of the before New Year's Day, but definitely by the next weekend after that, unless it starts raining real hard up north. One year up north, they were so underwater up there they couldn't get the bare root trees to us until March that year, but that's unlikely to happen this year.
Do I need a pre-order? You said you sold out in one weekend. If I don't make it that weekend, do I
Well,
need a
that's when
pre-order?
we had like 12 apple trees in containers. We're getting about 40 of the sundowners in, so I don't think we'll sell out of them for a while, but if you wanted to pay for one now, we'll hold it for you when they come.
Okay.
What we already sold out of, we think, is the Royal Crimson cherries are sold out,
Okay.
but nothing else is really sold out at this point.
Can you get that in? Can you get that?
We can get it, but unless you order 3, I probably wouldn't get it. It's not that. I don't know. I didn't find it to be that good. Now, I was mentioning about storage apples. So a lot of the old apples, like Pippin, don't taste good off the tree. So most of the old apples, like Mutsu, is an old-fashioned apple. It wins a lot of taste tests, but off the tree, it's a rock. I mean, when it falls off the tree, it's still a rock. You have to store the thing in a cellar for a month before you can eat it. So a lot of the old apples, like Pippins and things, they don't taste good off the tree. Because that was their thing. You had to store them while they were storage apples. Yes.
What about the leaves on the apple
It's an
trees?
anna.
Do they fall off at any time for any reason? Or
Yeah,
is it
usually
just-
they fall off by themselves. If we have anything near 40 degrees, they'll start dropping. Now, occasionally, especially the Fujis won't drop their leaves. Now, the Fuji is a later blooming apple, so the early apples, we mentioned the Dorset, the Einschmier, and the Anna, they usually bloom late January through February. And then all the rest of the apples tend to start blooming around late April, May, June for several months. So if your Fuji still has leaves on it in March, at the end of March, I would just take the leaves and strip them off with your fingers. Just do that and go zip down the branch and they just pop off. Get rid of the leaves, they'll bloom better without the leaves on.
Would you say the same thing for my pink ladies? Because right now I've got as much foliage almost as that, and I just harvested 30 apples off my tree about a month ago.
Yeah, well, I leave the
And in
leaves
fact,
on.
I'm getting new buds.
I can leave the leaves on for now because they're still getting energy out of them, but a month before they're due to bloom, strip them off so that they bloom better.
So, and certainly as I think someone else mentioned, the blooms now, take them off.
Might as well take the flowers and fruit off because it can't develop. When the nights get cold, the fruit can't develop at all.
And right now, if I'm getting what appears to be leaf buds, certainly leave those alone. But you said towards the time when the normal budding would occur, take off the existing leaves, right?
Right. Yes.
So, one of the early ones, like, June, July, so then we should strip their leaves like now, right? Before they bud?
No, they haven't had any cold yet. I would say by next month strip them. Because they're usually due to bloom late January into February. Because you only need 2 weeks of no leaves for them to bloom again. Okay, now pear trees, there's only one pear that does well here. So, now pears do need a chill. Compared to apples, they need a chill. And it makes sense because they evolved south before apples did. So the climate they're used to is more like Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia. That's their climate. And plants from those latitudes, you get the heat waves in the winter, they have to stay sleeping, so they developed a chill factor to keep them sleeping for the winter. So the only apple that doesn't need much chill is Hood. So we grow an apple, pear. We grow a pear called Hood. And Hood is an unusual pear. So the original pears, this is European pear right here. and this is an Asian pear or Japanese pear right here. So neither one of these usually do very well in Orange County because they need more chill. Now, back in the 80s when we had some chilly winters, I grew 12 Asian pears and they all fruited for about a 2-year period when we had some really cool winters, but haven't seen much activity ever since on them. But if you live in a canyon or near one of the big rivers, Santa Ana River, San Juan Creek, Trabuco River, any of the big rivers, or even Laguna Canyon Road, you can probably get enough chill to grow the Asian pears and some of the European pears. There's a friend of mine who lives by the Santa Ana River grows Bartlett pears. I've never been able to grow Bartlett pear. My dad tried for 10 years. He got pears this big. But his friend along the Santa Ana River grows Bartlett pears. So any big river gets that cold air. So if you haven't been to the other lecture before, all the cold air that develops in the canyons flows like water in the wintertime to the ocean through the river canyons along the riverbed. So if you live anywhere near the big rivers, the bigger the river, the colder the air flows to the ocean. You get more chill there. It may not be freezing cold, but it's chilly enough to get these things to make fruit. So you can grow the Asian pears in the canyons or along the big rivers. Now, so this needs this 20th century is the lowest chill Asian pear. It needs about 400 hours. We rarely get that here. If you're by a big river again, you can. And this is a pear from the deep south, Southern King pear, 400 hours or less. We're carrying this one because this might be low enough that we can see pears even right here, but we'll see. We don't know yet on that one. That's a new one. But what they did is back in the 60s, they were crossing Asian European pears, and they got a few pears that needed only about 300 hours of chill. So the first one now was called Orient pear. We grew that, got fruit, looked great, had no taste at all. Another one out of that group was Kiefer pear. Looked wonderful, no flavor at all, but they did decently here. So some breeder back crossed that down in Florida. They call it the Southern Cross pears. They took those pears and crossed them back with European pears, and one of the ones they got of that was Hood. So Hood is 3/4 European, 1/4 Asian. It looks like a Bartlett pear or a D'Anjou pear. Pretty good tasting, and it ripens in July. It likes to have a pollinator, but the pollinator has never done well for me. So there's another Southern Cross pear called Florida Home. In fact, it's been shortened to Florida Home, but it should be Florida Home. That's the original name I knew it by, but someone shortened it, Florida Home. But that thing seems to need 300 hours of chill, so I can't get that thing to bloom too often along with the Hood. The Hood seems to need no chill. I mean, 2014 and 2015, the 2 warmest winter years we've ever seen are recorded. The Hood did really well. It was loaded. So it loves that, doesn't need the cold in the winter. It's loved our climate recently, like this last summer with the extreme high humidity. I had a wonderful crop on that thing again. So I've lost Florida Home. In some books they'll tell you that Calmus pear, which is European, does well here. I've grown Calmus for 20 years consecutively. I've had a total of 2 pears on it in 20 years. So Calmus needs a colder winter too. But Calmus is the highest quality European pear supposedly. Now we're trying some Asian pears. We're carrying the 20th century again, because that one did pretty well back in the 80s at my house in Lake Forest, the 20th century. Some companies sell another one called Niji Seiki. Well, Niji Seiki is just a Japanese translation of 20th century. So they got 2 pairs. The catalogs have 2 pairs. One's Niji Seiki, one's 20th century. The same thing. And Shinseki is New Century. Shinseki is the best Asian pear I've ever eaten, but it needs more cold than we get normally. The thing about the Asian pears is they're very tender but very crispy. A lot of people say it's like eating crushed ice. It's just very tender, very crispy, very juicy, and not as sweet as the European. Some people will tell you the European pears are just what they call it, cloyingly sweet. It's too sweet. So the Asian pears are less sweet. The lowest chill Asian pear may be Hosui. So we brought some in this year because some people said they're having luck with Hosui. So 20th century Hosui, you might be able to grow them in our area. And we've also got another hybrid called pineapple, which they say needs less than 300 hours. It's new, we haven't tried that one yet. So pineapple hood may be the two that do well here. Hosui and 20th century we try.
Karen, I have a question. I don't know, we were a little late, so I don't know if you've addressed this. Watering on the apples and pears too. How much
Apple
of-
water, they like it wet. Apple is more critical than pears, but they like it wet, and it can handle overly wet. So both, like pear orchards traditionally have been flood irrigated, where they just once a week open up the floodgates, let it just soak in water for a few days, and then let them dry out for another week, and then soak them again. They can be underwater. So both apples and pears, when it's wet, they just love it. So keep on the wet side. Yes.
So, watering then would be important like a couple months before they ripen? Is that the key time? For the
Sizing
fruit?
up the fruit.
Yeah.
So right when they're blooming, it's important, but it's usually wet at that time anyway. And then as the fruit's growing rapidly to reach full size, you need a lot of water. I believe the Asian pears is late summer. Hood is early to midsummer. Pineapple, I don't recall when that ripened.
Yeah.
August. Now pears are more susceptible to fire blight than the apples are. So my hood pear is always coming down with fire blight. My apples rarely do. So I'm cutting and pinching. When I first grew my hood pear tree, in those days we got in bare root that looked like this one branch or just a single stick, and it took 4 years to get to bloom. And when it was young, it didn't make much fruit unless it had the Florida home blooming at the same time. But about 10 years ago, I lost the Florida home. It just died. It just didn't like our warm winters. And the hood stood all by itself, and I was going to pull it out, but then it just started producing. As it got older and older, it started producing more and more. Now that it's close to 20 years old, it just goes, 300 pears on the tree every year. I eat maybe 1/10 of them, no less than that. But the tree just produces incredible amounts of fruit. Yes.
Is it important to kind of lean out the branches on a pear too, or?
Well, they'll fruit no matter what. I mean, my hood, I've left it alone, and what it's done is it wants to grow straight up. But now it's got a lot of branches that are so weighed down by the fruit that they're just spread out like that. But it's, if you train it the way we were talking about earlier with horizontal branches, it'll produce more at a younger age.
Okay.
I didn't know a lot of this when I was growing fruit trees 20 years ago.
Would you cut this gigantic branch out?
Yeah, it's too stiff to lay it out, so you probably just cut it off or cut it down to here and let it sprout out again there. Okay, we're getting one quince in, and this is quince foliage. I had a couple quince trees in the nursery 2 weeks ago, and they both sold last week, so I can't show you the tree. This is actually a rootstock quince, so the leaves on the fruiting quince are a little bit thicker, a little bit fuzzier than this. So quince is a relative of, close related to pears. The fruit looks like a fuzzy pear. So that's a quince. And the unusual thing about quince trees, the fruiting trees at least, is they bear on new growth. So you can, it don't matter how you prune a quince, it just flowers, it grows leaves and starts making flowers and fruits.
Are they self-fertile?
Self-fertile, totally self-fertile, don't need any chill. So they're pretty easy to grow. They get fire blight easy also, so you have to watch that. But other than that, they're actually a very pretty small tree. They don't grow there that big. On their own, they might reach 8 foot by 8 foot. So they're small. They're kind of a nice branching structure. A lot of people use them just for ornamental value. The flowers are big white flowers. And the fruit will hang on there a long time. So quince fruit really, it's like a rubber pear that's real perfumed. So it's hard to eat them fresh unless you get them rotten. So generally what you do with quince is you boil them or cook them or bake them for a long time, and then they become incredibly nice because they have a lot of perfume and a lot of acidity. So a lot of people say, yeah, their grandmother from Poland made the best quince pie or the best quince preserves, or my daughter has baked the quince, and boy, it turns out really nice when you bake it. So quince is interesting. We're carrying one variety called Smyrna quince, which is one of the original ones from Eastern Europe. And I just brought this in because loquats are in the same family. And they're unusual in that they flower in the fall and the fruit ripens in the spring. Very unusual for any fruit tree to do that. But they're native to China and they were taken to southern Japan. But that thing is real popular, and then you travel in the neighborhoods around here and see loquat trees all over the place. So one of the easiest trees to grow out here. In fact, one of our textbooks will tell you that this is one of the few fruit trees that can produce normal fruit on rainfall alone, because the rain happens at the right time. So
Is loquat the one with the little black seed on the inside? Is that the loquat?
they have,
Brown seed.
yeah, the seeds are
It's got a big seed in the middle.
Yes.
5 or 6 normally. So here's a picture of a loquat.
Oh,
It's a grapefruit.
They have a sweet, tart, peach. I know there's other things you can detect in it, but it's like a sweet tart peach. And you just spit out the seeds and everything, and spit out the bottom end and eat everything else. Kind of like you would eat a pear. So we do have a lot of loquat to stock right now. The interesting one we carry, there's one out there that's written on the can, 1Z2Z. And the reason for that is because instead of having 5 to 6 seeds for fruit, it has 1 or 2.
Oh.
Now all our loquats are grown from seed. Some nurseries carry the grafted ones. Most loquats are grown from seed that you buy. The seedlings are variable. I don't know, 1Z2Z though, it's always been a seed grown variety. And the one I have in my house was a seed grown variety, and it comes out with 1 or 2 seeds. So it seems to stay that way pretty well. The thing about loquats, interestingly, was that the same varieties that were too tart to eat 20 years ago seem to be bland nowadays. It's like the weather has warmed up so much in the wintertime that they're getting a lot sweeter than they used to be. So.
But in using it, one thing is the oxidation factor. It gets ugly looking really fast.
Yeah, you don't see loquats in the store because you got to pick them and eat them immediately. So.
What did you say about, I think it was it blossoms in winter or
Fall.
fall?
My loquats already finished blooming for the year, and their fruit's already forming. They can't. If the fall is real cool, sometimes it delays the bloom until late winter. Sometimes we see them bloom in January, February, but usually they've already bloomed by now.
How old do they have to be to produce? Because I've had mine probably in the ground 4 years. It grows really well, but I get nothing, not even flowers.
It'll bloom it should bloom either this year or next year.
So like 5 years and up.
Yeah, because I grew, when I was a kid, I grew a loquat hedge from seed. And when the plants, I think they were 5 years in the ground from a seed, they were about this tall and this wide. We had 10 of them, and they all made fruit the 5th year.
Okay.
My neighbor at the time liked loquats, so we just made a hedge between our houses. And out of those 10 plants we planted, 9 of them, the fruit was excellent, 1 of them wasn't too good. So with seedlings, they turn out pretty good, it seems.
So about pruning, do you, if you want to keep them small, do you do kind of like the same thing as the other fruit trees, or?
Well, what we do with loquats is after they fruit, we just, right after you pick the fruit off, which is usually spring, just clip them real short and get rid of some of the branches that are too long, but just keep, so what, I mean, one time at my house I had a loquat that was getting just too big. So right after it fruited, I cut it down to a stump. And it flowered and fruited the next year. But it was real early. It had fruited, or like the fruit was off in March, and I cut it down right at that point, right when it finished fruiting. And then it had enough time to get its foliage back and be ready to flower and fruit by the next year, or by the next fall. It was pretty amazing that I can do that from a stump. But generally we trim them back and thin out some of the branching so that it can grow in the same area, because we try to keep, because they can reach 30 feet, so we try to keep them down below 8 foot in our house so we can pick the fruit.
Alright, so even like that one, if you cut it low in like spring, summer, early summer, it'll branch out from the bottom a little bit lower.
Yeah, it can. Again, we had a hedge, and in fact, the loquats are often used for ornamental value because they're a good looking plant. They
Yeah,
do
mine's
drop
growing.
a lot of leaves though.
It's growing really well right now, right? Is it now the growing season or something? I mean, it's just new leaves are coming out.
Yeah.
The trunk on my loquat must be this big now.
It's a good 10 years or 12, 15 years,
It's
yeah.
been there it was there before. It was planted before. it was there.
If you do buy loquats, always good to buy 2. Most of them are self-fertile, but not every single one is. If they're not self-fertile, they make just a few fruits. They'll bloom and make just a few. First loquat I grew was champagne loquat. It was a grafted variety. Didn't make much fruit until one of its seedlings started blooming, and then suddenly the mother started making a lot more fruit. So we knew that one apparently was needing a pollinator, but most loquats are self-fertile.
Birds like them. The parrots pass by in the morning and then again in the evening.
Yeah, if you have
They
parrots.
get everything on the top.
Okay, I think that's all I have today.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, that cannon.
All do well. My favorite for some personally is the Northern Food. That's one of the film ones.
No, I mean, I meant, I'm sorry.
How many fruit trees do you
We're
have?
talking. Number 1 rated in the world is Parkdale.
Four in the beginning of last year.
So these are berries coming in now. For juicing, these 2 are the best. For fresh eating, the ones we already have are the best because they have soft seeds.
She eats the seeds.
Did you put them?
Yeah,
These have
I
the
did
harder
4 and the
seeds.
4 by
And the ones we have out here right now have the
And
softer
this year,
seeds.
early this year, I did 5
You get the list.
Sorry, I was on for something yesterday at the grocery store.